This is Booksellers. I am Prometheus, and we're doing a check-in on the book Power and Thrones by Dan Jones. The Crusades have begun. I will be mentioning Crusades 1 through 5, because those are the interesting ones. The First Crusade, starting in the 1095, if my memory serves me correct. I read this chapter a few weeks ago, and I've been putting this off. Byzantium has lost control of the Holy Land to the Umayyads. I think it was the Umayyads. There are so many caliphates. Anyway, we've lost control. This is terrible news, terrible news. Well, the Pope decided that he would spice up the price of service in the war. The remission of sins. Turns out this is a great way of getting an army. And also stirring up a mob with some local preachers. What better way to get ready to go take back the Holy Land than to kill a bunch of Jews in the Rhineland? What the two things have to do with each other? Not entirely sure. But that's what happened, resulting in the Rhineland massacres. This will be a recurring theme. And so, a mob of people, and eventually the knights and the kings, make their way down to Constantinople, where they help shore up the defenses, and then in but a mere 4 years, in 1099, they actually managed to get control of Jerusalem back and form the Crusader kingdoms of Antioch. There were 3 or 4 others, and the kingdom of Jerusalem proper. What I found fascinating is that William the Conqueror's son was also in the part of this crusade. I didn't know that. Which means that there were Normans there was Norman kingdom ships in the Holy Land all the way to the borders of Scotland, which is not something I think about very often. And then they were promptly relegated to the sideshow of history and lost a lot of political standing. And so they started suffering losses, the Crusader kingdoms. The Second Crusade wanted to try and emulate the first one, which then just became a pale mockery of it, resulting in the divorce of Eleanor of Aquitaine from King Philip II of France, then marrying Henry. This will have no long-standing political conflicts between the two countries, ever. Third Crusade, I don't remember, but I think it went slightly better than the second, because they didn't try and emulate the first. The one that I like is the Fourth Crusade, because of how horribly it went. Started with the French, I don't remember which king, recruiting the Doge of Venice, Enrico del Golo, the Doge, I'm just going to call him the Doge because that's his name, to construct a fleet for 85,000 francs, or the equivalent. A lot of money. And 30,000 crusaders. Yeah, those crusaders and the money didn't appear. Which left the Venetians, oh god, I can't remember. The Venetians with a lot of ships and nobody to buy them. What is one to do? Well, they were designed for crusade, so let us go crusade. And so this 90-year-old blind Enrico Doge decides to put on a Crusader's cross on his cap, hop on a ship with a bunch of other Venetians, and go crusading. And what did they crusade? Across the Adriatic Sea, a town called Zara, which they immediately burn, pillage, plunder, and a whole bunch of other nasty atrocities, like you do. But they made off with quite a bit of money. Great. So they kind of sit down there and chill for a year-ish. And then they get a letter, a request for help, from a former emperor of Constantinople. How fortunate! We were thinking about robbing the place anyway, and now we have probable justification to go down there and help. The Emperor, I'm fairly certain, was killed before the Crusaders ever showed up. He was blinded and got worms in his face. But, needless to say, after a couple of months of siege, the Venetians managed to take control of Constantinople, which was technically not... I don't feel like that was the correct target for a crusade, but, you know, crusades are crusades. What are you going to do? They then start taking pretty much everything that's not nailed down, including 4 bronze or brass horses from the Hippodrome, I think that's what it was called, and they moved it to Venice. And what do you know? They're still there. How did they even move the thing? Okay, sure, why not? This causes a small riot in the city, which then results in a fire, burning down half a third of the city is now on fire. The riots are still happening. The Crusaders are killing everybody, trying to gain order again. This is just a complete mess. And this all happened because somebody didn't buy the ships they contracted. This is important. Pay for what you actually want to buy. If you hire somebody to build a bunch of ships, buy the ships. Otherwise, somebody will go on crusade. And if anybody says, oh, well, let's ask for help, what's the worst can happen? You may now reference the 4th Crusade. That is the worst thing that can happen for asking for help. Also, the Crusaders had to know that you have a deposed emperor asking for your help. There's not a guarantee that he's going to be able to pay you. But, needless to say, after all of this shenanigery going on, they've managed to cover the costs of what they were supposed to be paid, and so they just decide to leave. The 5th Crusade invades the Delta River of the Nile. Sort of goes well, sort of not goes well. No crusade properly gets the wonder of the First Crusade of the 1090s. And that was the main crusades. But there are more crusades. There are crusades everywhere. There are crusades in Prussia by the Teutonic Knights, dealing with those pagan Latvians and Prussians. There are crusades in the Iberian Peninsula, dealing with the caliphates there. There are crusades in Hungary with the Magyars. And this will come in... No, I'm not going to tell you. There's another video. We'll talk about it there. That's the Crusades. There are a bunch of other things that happened with some of the greatest knights to live at the time. More craze, plundering, how this all connects with other things. Oh! Wonderful inventions that were invented during the Crusades. Such wonders as rest stops, run by the Hospitallers, and major advancements in financing for the transfer of funds, such as the traveler's check, were developed and propagated by the Templars during the Crusades to allow for safe transit of pilgrims from Europe to the Holy Land. It's amazing. I didn't know that. I didn't know that there were economic institutions. Oh, and there are trusts that were set up in the 1300s, or no, a little after the Crusades, but they were partially connected to the developments done in the Crusades, that are still active to this day. 600 years. 600 years of trust fund. That's so much history. Well, that's about that. And, why do I hear hoofbeats in the distance? I'm sure it's nothing. It'll be fine. Who knows? Maybe King David will show up.